Okay, so this bit of learning is all about something called classical conditioning. And classical conditioning doesn't just relate to dogs at all, it just is about how learning occurs. And there are other types of conditioning, such as operant conditioning, but we're not talking about that in this sort of session, talk, whatever this is. So this is about classical conditioning. And classical conditioning was developed by a guy called Pavlov, and it was complete accident. And if you want to look up all about the study and stuff that he did, go up and look at it, because it is really interesting. But basically, what he discovered is there is a learning that occurs via association where something that happens completely involuntary within a person or a dog, so such as a feeling, is associated with something that's completely neutral. So the thing itself doesn't evoke a sort of an emotion. Let's just go with an emotion, because it could be a natural response. So in Pavlov, for example, it was saliva. It was a salivering response from the dog that was completely involuntary. The dog didn't decide to saliva, it just happened. So let's just go with an emotion as well, because emotions aren't usually sort of decided. I'm not going to go too much into that because they are a little bit, but, it's an involuntary response. So an involuntary response is paired with a neutral stimuli, okay? So I'm not such a big fan of all these terms because it puts people off entirely, but it just means something that you can't help is paired with something that doesn't really actually mean anything. And then that response happens with that neutral thing that doesn't mean anything. And so the best example, so like I say, if we go back to Pavlov, what he worked out is dogs salivated at the presence of food, right? That was a completely natural occurrence. The dog didn't think about salivering, but it happened really naturally because the food evoked that response within the dog. Now, what he found is he could pair that salivering response with other stuff that didn't actually mean anything. So the footsteps of the volunteer or the people that worked there also ended up provoking that response. And the main one that everyone knows about is the ringing of a bell evoked that salivering response. And the reason for that is because of something called classical conditioning. So basically, if you ring a bell at a dog, it won't saliva. It won't get excited. It won't feel anything because the bell is neutral. It doesn't mean anything. However, if you pair that with something such as food, in Pavlov's case, that provoked that response, such as salivering, and it always happened, so the bell and food, bell and food, bell and food, what starts to happen is that becomes the association. So the bell is associated with food, and therefore that's how we get that involuntary response to the neutral stimuli. So the bell rings, the dog thinks food's coming, and it starts salivering. So that is an example of classical conditioning. So it's where the dog doesn't think about it. It just happens. So some examples. So I've got some things down here. I don't know if we can see them. So we've got a bowl, some car keys. The food is not. The food is there to explain something else in a minute. And a lead. So basically, these three things can have associations via classical conditions. So I'm going to take them one at a time. So we've got a couple of good ones usually. So a lead. The lead itself is neutral. If you showed a dog a lead that had no association with it whatsoever, it wouldn't have a response. It wouldn't mean anything to it because it's not been paired with something. But usually leads evoke excitement and anticipation because it usually means we're going for a walk. And I mean usually because for some dogs it might not. So let's just take a dog that gets excited with going on a walk. It loves its walk. Every time it goes on a walk, its lead appears. It won't take long before you pick up the lead and that excitement will happen. And that's because the dog has been classically conditioned to the lead, meaning a walk. Now, the reason I said usually a couple of minutes ago is because not all dogs have that nice life that lots of our dogs have. And for some, a lead might mean it's being tied up outside in the wind and the rain, for example. So if a dog had that association with a lead, it's going to have a negative response to it. It's going to have a completely different response to the dog who had a positive association with it. And that's because, like I say, this lead itself is neutral. It doesn't mean anything. It's just what is being associated with it. So that can be classically conditioned. Sorry, my phone stopped recording. So a food bowl. Well, I say a food bowl. A bowl itself is a neutral stimuli. The bowl doesn't actually mean anything. The reason it is classically conditioned is the exact reason as I said, food bowl. So this bowl usually, again, always means food. So if a bowl always means food, the presence of the bowl is going to become exciting to the dog. So again, that's exactly the same as the bell. The bell and the bowl have exactly the same association for the dog. Always means the presence of food is going to follow. So the bowl, classically conditioned to mean food. And then we've got something a little bit different. So car key. So car key itself, again, completely neutral. This doesn't evoke a response within a dog. However, the association that it's paired with it does. So if your dog likes going in the car because the car, and again, we've got a little bit of a double one going on here because the car itself is a neutral stimuli. The car, so let's just take away the keys for a second, actually. The car itself is a neutral stimuli. So if the dog goes in the car and goes to a park and has a great time, then the car is going to be classically conditioned to mean something really, really awesome. If the dog goes in the car and starts driving and feels sick, the dog is going to start associating the car with feeling nauseous. So it's going to start feeling really rubbish, right? So the dogs that feel like that aren't going to like the presence of a car, but the dogs that go to a park and have a great time are going to like the presence of the car. So that's a neutral stimuli. So again, classically conditioned. And then if we add in the car key, for example, every time you go in the car, you need to pick up your car key. So, and again, so we've got a double couple of things going on. If you pick up your car key and the dog then associates that with going in the car and it always feels sick when it's in the car, this itself is going to have a rubbish association to the dog. The dog's not going to want to see this. But the other thing it might mean is you going out. So let's use our house keys. House keys might be a better example of this one. Let's keep the car separate. Let's not confuse it. The house keys. Every time you pick up your house keys, you're going out of the house because you need to lock it. Now, again, for some dogs, that might not mean anything. But to a dog that has separation anxiety, that dog's going to hate your house keys being picked up. Sorry, I had to stop again. My lessons were starting. So I'm going to carry on where I left off. So if your dog has separation anxiety and it associates you leaving the house with picking up your keys, then the presence of the keys is going to evoke the concern of you leaving the house. So again, those keys themselves are neutral. They don't mean anything. If they always mean you're going to leave the house, then the keys start to produce that fear-based response. So why does this matter? It matters because we can think, okay, what is the association the dog is making? And if it's making an association we don't want, then we can stop it. So, for example, if the dog gets super excited every time you pick up that lead and it starts going mad before you've even left the house, it's not going to be the best start to your walk because your dog is already going mad. So you need to teach the dog that the presence of the lead doesn't always mean you're going for a walk. So you can then pick up your lead and start from a calmer place of mind. So you just pick up your lead every now and again throughout the day. And exactly the same thing with your house key. So say your dog has separation anxiety, and please don't think that just by watching this you'll fix a dog with separation anxiety. But if you pick up your keys and your dog starts getting worried, you can just start picking up your keys and maybe telling the dog it's a good thing. So you can start to eliminate where the dog starts to get concerned, and you can start to teach it. Oh, well, I'm not going to get into separation anxiety now, but you can start to undo that association. So a better one, for example, is the doorbell. So the doorbell, if it always means somebody is going to be at the door, the dogs are going to kick off. So you can start to play your doorbell throughout the day and make your dogs have a new association with it. So the doorbell going off means treats in your bed, for example. Then your dogs can start to change that association that they make with the doorbell. So that's one reason that this classical conditioning can work. But the other reason I wanted to talk about it was your dog's association with their name. So if your dog hears its name and doesn't have an awesome response to it, we want to change that, because we want our dogs to be classically conditioned that their name, because again, their name doesn't actually mean anything. It's just the association that the dog makes. So one of my dogs is called Ren. I can say Ren and it not mean anything to any of the other dogs because she's the only one that's been conditioned to have an association with that word. So if you say your dog's name and they don't have an awesome association with it, if they don't flip their heads around and go, yeah, what are we going to do? You want to change it, because the likelihood is what you've done is you've slipped into something called operant conditioning, which is a fantastic way of training dogs. But the likelihood is what you've done is you've said your dog's name and waited for a response, and then the dog gets a reward or something else accordingly. That's operant conditioning. We want our dogs to be classically conditioned to their name. So we want that name means good stuff, no matter what. All right? So we want your dog to hear its name and go, good stuff, sweeties, sweeties, sweeties. And then we can move it on. But to start with, all I want you to do, say your dog's name, give it a sweet. Say your dog's name, give it a sweet. And be careful that you're not saying your dog's name at other times, because what happens is you use your dog's name and you go, Fido, for example. Fido, stop that. Fido, pack that in. Fido, here. But it's all negative. That's why dogs switch off from their names and they don't want to hear it. So you want your dog to hear its name and have the most awesome association with it. So do it. Have some treats out ready. Say your dog's name, give it a sweet. Say your dog's name, run and put some sweets somewhere. Say your dog's name, throw a treat. Just get your dog to associate awesomely with its name. So there we go. That is all about classical conditioning. There obviously I've only scratched the surface, but it's just to give an idea of one way in which your dogs can learn through classical conditioning. So go out there and start thinking about what are the associations your dog is making and see if you can make a difference.